Started. So hi everyone. I should have confirmed. Can you all see my screen? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, perfect. So tonight, Kaylee and I are presenting our strategic plan for All Bodies on Bikes. I don't have too much to say here at the very beginning, except that we're really excited about this. For those of you who know the history of All Bodies on Bikes, and we'll talk about this a little bit, we did a really good job of putting the cart before the horse for the first 3 years of our existence. And so now we're kind of playing, not kind of, we are very much playing catch up of getting all of our ducks in a row and making sure that we are a sustainable organization into the future. And it's not just like a flashbang in the pan and this fun thing that happened for a couple of years, but we want to continue on sustainably. So that's kind of the origin of this strategic plan. Please use the chat function. Kaylee and I will both be monitoring it. The presentation will be about 30 minutes if we can limit ourselves that way, and there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. Anything to add at this point, Kaylee?
No, just quick introductions for those that I haven't met. I'm Kaylee Kornhauser. I am co-founder of All Bodies on Bikes with Marley and our board president. And Marley, you might know everyone on the call, but if you want to introduce yourself too.
Sure, yeah. So hi, Marley Blonsky, she, her pronouns, and I am the co-founder and serving as executive director currently. And we'll get to it, but we've got a lot of folks on the call who are board members or involved in one way or another. So if y'all want to chime in into the chat with who you are, where you're watching, calling in from, whatever, and how you're affiliated. Maybe you're a friend, maybe you're Steamboat Gravel, maybe you're on the board or chapter leader, but please do feel free to chime in there because it's always nice to see. So, okay. So real quickly, what the agenda is going to be, we're going to spend some time at the beginning talking about, foundational stuff, our mission, our vision, our values, our organizational goals. And Kaylee's going to talk through the strategic planning process and how we arrived on this. We'll talk a little bit about a SWOT analysis and the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then talk about some of our action planning that we did and kind of where All Bodies on Bikes is moving to. So our organizational overview, we were founded in 2021 with the release of the All Bodies on Bikes film. It's actually a really funny origin story. Kaylee and I made a film with Shimano and we realized, hey, this could probably be a thing. Let's make an Instagram and a website. And so a couple days before the film came out, we put it all together and the rest has spawned from that. We have 13 regional chapters. You probably see the number 11. We just recently grew to 13 chapters, and we'll spend a bit more time later talking about the plan for chapter growth. This is our third year of taking a team of non-traditional athletes to Steamboat Gravel, one of our kind of hallmark programs and signature programs. And then we officially became a 501c3 in 2023. It's almost been a year exactly, which is really exciting. And I just filed our taxes, which is also really exciting because we are official and doing all the official things.
So I'll start by just giving a little bit of background on our strategic planning process. So after we became actually 6 months before we became a nonprofit in preparation for it, we grew our board, and we've got a really fantastic board now. Excuse me, you can probably hear my dog crying in the background, and that will continue. We've got a fantastic board now. Many of those folks are on tonight. We realize, as Marley said, we've got this grassroots organization, we've got the cart before the horse, and we wanted to catch up organizationally. And so the first thing that we did as a board was get together virtually and have a whole day long Zoom call where we thought about our mission and our vision and values as a starting place. And then that took us to some broad goals. And so we want to share with you tonight what those mission, vision, values are. If you've seen our mission before, it won't look a whole lot different, but here is our newly stated mission. We founded this organization to create a body size inclusive community, educate and change the industry, ensure access to safe and comfortable biking equipment, and celebrate joyful movement on a bicycle. So hopefully this all looks familiar to you, but we're pretty proud to have it succinctly here now. And then we moved on and put together our vision. And so our vision is we envision a world where anyone, regardless of body size, weight, or perceived fitness level, can safely enjoy a bike ride in a way that is joyful to them. And now we'll get into our values.
Yeah, and so we thought these value statements were really important because we do exist in kind of this weird space of like exercise, health, and fitness, and it can be a slippery slope. And so we wanted to be very clear on what our values are as an organization when it comes to these things, and I think this will clarify it. So our first value, it's not really hierarchical in any way, but we just have them numbered, is that body size exists on a spectrum and our lived experiences are not the same as other people's in similar or differently sized bodies. We recognize that many factors impact this, especially race, country of origin, mobility level, and income level. Our second value statement, our second value, is that we ride bikes as a form of joyful movement and appreciate all forms of bike riding, including electric bikes, adaptive bikes, and tricycles. Kind of fun. We had an All Bodies on Bikes Northwest Arkansas chapter ride last night, and there was a person on a trike, there was a bunch of e-bikes, there was mountain bikes. It was just really cool to see everybody riding joyfully.
Here's a picture of me, and this is my slide. Our third value is that all bodies on bikes in our event strive to be body neutral. And that means we don't talk about dieting and weight change at our events or in our organization.
And then finally, we celebrate our bodies for what they can do wherever they are at today. We recognize that things change and our bodies are pretty amazing, powerful things, and we like to celebrate them every day that we can. Oh, sorry, Kaylee, that was yours. I stole it from you.
You're totally fine. So once we had our mission, vision, values, which we've had since the very beginning, but we reiterated and clarified through our strategic planning process, we brought this fantastic board together, and you can see the names listed here of our board members, and really thought about our goals. So Marley and I, we came together through friendship and informal presentations and a film, but we didn't necessarily have like strategic broad goals and an action plan. We've kind of just been doing things as they come our way or as the mood strikes us. And so this board helped us get into these goals that we're going to show you next. And the way it's going to work is that the goals are pretty broad. And then as we move further into the presentation, you're going to see that things get a lot more specific. So we'll move on to our goals now. And I think this is you, Marley.
Oh, okay, that's fine. So our three broad goals, like Kaylee said, they are really broad, is one, to build a joyful cycling community. The second one is to create a cultural shift in cycling. And then third is to sustain our efforts. And you might be saying, Marley, these aren't SMART goals. Like, where's your measurement? Where's your all of those things? But we like these goals and we are sticking to them, and we will show you our action planning and kind of strategies and tactics to achieve these goals next. So the first goal, building a joyful cycling community, the strategies that we're going to use to achieve that goal. Number one, we just want to get more people on bikes. Number two, we want to set the precedent for making people feel welcome at events and on bicycles and anytime that we are around. We want to continue to support and grow our network. And I probably shouldn't say too much about, we'll talk more about that later. It's really easy to get into the details right now, but keeping it high level. We want to make sure we can maintain our focus on intersectionality. Really importantly, we want to create opportunities for beginners all the way to the most experienced riders, especially acknowledging that, just because we're in bigger bodies does not mean that we are all beginners. So make sure we have those opportunities for all sorts of riding levels. And then finally, we want to continue to have a presence at bike events.
So our next goal was to create a cultural shift in cycling. And just like the first goal, we had some strategies that we came up with to achieve this goal. So the first is that we've from the beginning worked with industry, and we want to continue to do that to expand physical equipment options for larger riders. We also want to continue to work with the cycling industry to change the culture. And that's something that has been true to our work since the beginning, and we're going to keep doing it. We want to continue to grow our online support systems and continue to be a resource for the cycling community. So we've really got an industry focus and a community focus in this cultural shift work.
And then our third goal that we talked about is to sustain our efforts. And some of the strategies to get there is, hold on one second. That is not, it's not the correct language. It doesn't have the correct, I should have looked at this closer, but essentially the crux of sustaining our efforts is to make sure that we are financially sustainable. So we want to make sure that our executive director and potential staff are getting paid. We want to establish a donor base. We want to make sure that we have substantial sources of revenue, and then we want to work on grants. And before we send this deck out to everybody, we'll make sure that this slide gets updated with the correct strategies. But no big deal there. I think I had it all up here, but the crux of this one is to figure out the funding so that this org maintains sustainability into the future.
Sorry about that, Marley. And
That's
one
okay.
of the other parts of that goal is that because we put the cart before the horse, there's some just organizational aspects of a nonprofit that we didn't have, like the systems to track tax information and who an email listserv and things like that that we've been developing and figuring out as we go. So one of the next steps in our strategic planning was to do that SWOT analysis that if you're in corporate America, you've definitely heard of. So this is the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. And essentially, we wanted to do this activity or exercise as a board to really build our self-awareness around what are we doing well now? What sets us apart? What are our weaknesses? What do we want to improve on? And then what opportunities are out there, like the external context outside of all bodies on bikes? What are our goals culturally, and then what are our threats to our organization or to our mission? And so we'll briefly go over this, and you'll see we'll have a written strategic plan available in the coming weeks that'll get more in detail too on our SWOT.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on these. But strengths, we have a very passionate group of folks, and everybody we come across is also passionate about this. So that's a really good one. We do an amazing job leading inclusive rides. I've been on a number of them that our chapter leaders have led, and they are all executed flawlessly, and people really do feel a sense of belonging and a sense of welcomeness and inclusion, which was our kind of goal when we started this whole thing. And another one I would point out here is, we really do lead with joy, centering that and ensuring that folks can find that sense of joy, regardless of what kind of biking they enjoy. And then finally, I would just add, that we operate well in the chaos. I am a chaotic leader at times, and our team has been phenomenal at going along with it and reining me in when we need to, and just making it happen as we kind of write the rules as we go. Some weaknesses. This first one, it very quickly became the Marley show, and we never intended that to be the case. So making sure that there's a differentiation between Marley Blonsky and All Bodies on Bikes. So that's definitely a weakness there. The second one, learning to say no to events and partnerships. It's a nice problem to have that everybody wants a piece of us currently, but we are still a very small but growing organization. So figuring out when to say no to things. Making sure that we stick to our mission as we grow and don't get enamored with the latest shiny thing. And then another weakness right now is just a lack of funding. We do have some great sponsors, REI, Fat Tire, Shimano is about to come on as a sponsor, which is really exciting. Lots of individual donors, but we still need to grow that so that we can get to where we actually want to go. Some opportunities. The biggest one here is that inclusivity is a huge topic of conversation. Fat activism is growing. There's a lot of conversation around this topic. And so it's a great time to be doing this sort of work. There's also a lot of funding that we can access as a nonprofit, and we are figuring out how to do that. Another opportunity is lots of event directors and lots of folks within the bike industry hear our message and they understand it and they support it and they want to be part of it. So I don't really have any fear that the tide is going to turn on us and inclusion won't be a hot topic because at the end of the day, we all want to feel included, and people live in bigger bodies, and that will be the case forever because that's how humanity works. So we've got a lot of really amazing opportunities here. And then finally, some threats, of course, the challenge, people who won't accept our message, the rigmarole that goes along with that. An interesting one that came up was getting enamored with kind of niche allies. And so just making sure that we keep our messaging broad and kind of on brand with who our audience is. There's always a risk of injury at our events when we're leading a bike ride. And then there's the risk of burnout, especially as nearly everybody who's on this call is a volunteer at this point, and people are doing a lot of really hard work. I want to give a real quick shout out to Bobby Arispe. He's on our board. He does a lot of our marketing and branding, and he took this presentation that looked like a hot mess when I put it together and made it look beautiful. So thank you for that, Bobby.
So once we got through our mission, vision, values, and our broad goals and strategies to achieve those goals and the SWOT, we got into our action planning, which is the part that those of you joining this presentation are probably most interested to hear, and our board was definitely most interested in working on because it's really the bread and butter of what we're actually going to be doing in the next few years. So we'll go through these actions now. So the 3 broad goals you'll see on the left, those should look familiar. And then on the right, we've got our how we kind of thought about dividing up the different actions that we came up with. So we went through this huge brainstorming process that took multiple months. We prioritized the different actions that we came up with, and then we categorized them into these buckets. So under building a joyful cycling community, you're good. We've got local chapter actions as well as national programming actions. And then under creating a cultural shift in cycling, we've divided up our actions by industry-facing actions and community-facing actions. And then under our goal of sustaining our efforts, we've divided this up by financial actions and organizational actions. And we've actually, as an organization, put a board member in charge of each of these 6 areas of actions. That doesn't mean they're the only person working on it. In fact, they are really kind of supervising and making sure we're remaining on track with our own strategy and vision for each of these action areas. So we're going to get into each of these 6 areas and explain what we're thinking for the next few years. So we'll start with this goal. You've seen it already. So building a joyful cycling community, and we won't read through the strategies again, but that's a reminder. So some of our local chapter actions we'll start with first are to continue local chapter rides and events to grow our chapter programming. There were a lot of amazing ideas about ways to expand into mountain bike riding and bike packing trips and off-bike educational classes, REI opt-outside programming that we're already doing, but expanding it, bike everywhere programming. So lots of different ideas about ways to expand the actual programming in addition to the number of chapters. And so we'll talk a little bit in a couple slides about our plan for establishing new chapters. So currently, and this map actually, oh no, it does have everybody, right? Um, has shows where all of our existing chapters are. A lot of our amazing chapter leaders are on the call tonight, and if you haven't introduced yourself yet, please do in the chat. So we have these fantastic 13 existing chapters. We get requests all the time to establish new chapters in new locations. There is a ton of interest from people to start chapters in new locations, but we have been pretty conservative in our approach to expanding chapters because we want to do it responsibly and sustainably. And so we do intend to grow new chapters. In 2024, we want to add 3 to 4 new chapters, and you can see that we expand in 2025 to add 5 new chapters, and then by 2026, we're looking at 10 new chapters for that year and the next year. So we do have a growth trajectory. It is slower and then ramps up. And the reason for that is that we want to make sure that we're training chapter leaders, that we have resources and manuals available, that we've got a sustainable process with registrations and waivers and promotion materials. For those that don't know, when we launched our chapters, we brought all of the chapter leaders to Bentonville for a multi-day training and community building, and we actually all led a group ride together. So we want to be able to give some amount of support to our chapter leaders, either in the form of that in-person training or certainly tons of online resources. So that's our plan for local chapters, and I'll pass it to Marley for our national programming.
Yeah, so lots of good stuff happening here. Kaylee just mentioned planning and hosting a leadership retreat. There's something really magical that happens when you can all get together in person, that just doesn't happen over Zoom calls. And we've had a lot of Zoom meetings, and our team has been phenomenal at dedicating lots of evenings, but we definitely want to find a way to get everybody together in one space. We also want to do a public facing, we're calling it Camp ABOB. And it would basically be like a big retreat for anyone and everyone affiliated with All Bodies on Bikes, whether you're just a fan or somebody who rides bikes. But think summer camp for All Bodies on Bikes, where we ride bikes, there's a gear swap, there's vendors with stuff in our size. And so a lot more to come on that, but we really, really want to make that happen because we think it could be absolutely magical. We definitely want to plan and host some bike camping rides. And we want to do this both on our own and partnering with other orgs. And so this is already happening. So you'll hear about it soon, but we're partnering with Swift Industries, which is a bag maker in Seattle and some good friends of ours. So we'll be doing their solstice camp out. A number of chapters will be. Our Western Massachusetts chapter is doing a bike packing trip this summer with a group called the Venture Out Project. We still have spaces available for that if anybody wants to do that. And then AC, sorry, I used your real name. AC in Kansas City is working with a bike shop called Ottawa Bike and Trail, and they're doing it's called the Spring Roll, and it's a beginner focused bike packing trip. And they've got 50 people signed up. And so that should be really, really awesome. Yeah, so it should be a good time. We want to continue to host shakedown rides and activations at major events. This is a huge piece of visibility for us. And the way that a lot of folks have learned about All Bodies on Bikes is joining a shakeout ride. And then we want to increase our presence at new events. So thinking, maybe bringing a team to RAGBRAI, maybe doing a thing at AIDS Life Cycle, maybe getting involved with Bike MS. We're really open to options on this. So if you're listening to this and you hear something like, oh, you guys should be there, please reach out. No guarantees, but we've got a calendar going and we're trying to slot things in over the next couple of years. So speaking of events for this year, these are all the things that we are going to have a presence at over the next couple of months. This goes through August. So we just did Mid-South. We'll be at Sea Otter, and by we, I mean I will be at Sea Otter, but we will have a presence there. The 5-borough tour, I do want to highlight this one. This is in New York City, and we're having a team there. Open to the public, so if folks want to ride all 5 boroughs of New York City, please do join us. And you can see all the rest of them there, but we'll have a booth at Unbound, we'll have a booth at Grounded Nebraska, and we're also hosting a gear swap there. So one of the things that you'll notice with our programming is we really try and have intentional presence at events. So when there's a way to partner together to make it a really impactful activation, we do. So at Grounded Nebraska, we're doing a gear swap where folks can bring outdoor gear and we switch it out, or you can swap it with other people. Steamboat Gravel, we're taking a team again for the 3rd year, and a bunch of those folks are on this call. So thanks for joining in. Really excited to have y'all out there. And then at Gravel Worlds, we just announced this partnership. But similar to Mid-South Gravel, we are throwing the last place party. So Gravel Worlds is calling it the first to last party, and we'll be out there celebrating the very last person that comes in, which is really exciting. And it kind of fits with our ethos of celebrating every ride. Okay, so our second goal, so moving on from joyful community to second goal was to create a culture shift in cycling. And I'm going to speed up just a little bit. So you've already seen these strategies, but first I'm going to talk about the industry facing actions. And so, you've probably noticed in our goals and in our strategies, we talk a lot about working with the bike industry. And that's because we know that change is going to come from there. Consumers and leading rides is one thing, but we also need to make sure that, weight limits are present. Bike shops know how to work with people in bigger bodies, things like that. So some of the actions we're taking, we want to create information and resources for bike shops. We want to develop sponsor relations, definitely working on that quite a bit. A big program, we want to create a bike shop training certification program. And as I'm saying these, I want you all to keep in mind, this is a 5-year, is it 5-year strategic plan? It's a 5-year strategic plan. So this might look super ambitious, and it is very ambitious, but we do have some time to work on all these and get to that point. We really want to help establish industry standards for weight limits on bikes and components. This is a big, lofty goal for us, but we think it would have a huge impact if we could get some standardization on weight limits, or at least where the weight limits are posted. We want to do a social campaign to increase body size representation in advertising in the bike industry. And then finally, this one's kind of fun and it's already in process, but we want to work with Zwift, which is the virtual cycling game, for bigger bodied avatars. And I think folks would feel a lot more represented if the avatars reflected us. I don't know if this one's me or you, Kaylee.
I can do this one.
Okay,
So
great.
we've got our industry facing actions, and then we know that the community of people, you all and everybody that comes out on these rides and feels inspired to ride, is part of this All Bodies on Bikes community that we want to continue to support. So some of that involves our online presence through our website. We also have talked about an idea of an All Bodies on Bike film that focuses on other large body riders, similar to the film that Marley and I were in, but kind of an extension of it, continuing to publish articles on issues facing people in this community, and Marley continues to do that all the time, but elevating other voices as well. We've got our popular Biking for Big People class. We want to make sure that that's available online for people to take at any time. We've got our fantastic podcast that Marley and Maggie host, continuing to grow that and continue to have more voices on there, have our booth at more major events. That's something that we have been growing. We're going to just continue to grow. And then continuing to elevate more and more voices on different panels and interviews, not just in our own podcast, but elsewhere. And Beth, who's I think on this call, has been on lots of podcasts after her amazing DFL finish at Mid-South. So just another example of getting voices out there. And we've got our email newsletter that Marley keeps up. We want to continue to do that and increase our social media outreach. So a lot of this is continuing to elevate and sustain the efforts that we have already, but we know that the online community is so important, especially for people that don't live near one of our regional chapters. And so we want to continue to think of creative ways to build that community.
Yep. And then the third and final goal was to sustain our efforts. And again, these strategies aren't the correct ones, but the actions will explain what we're up to. Again, Kaylee, I don't know who's doing what because I apparently didn't put this. Am I doing this one or are you?
You can do it.
I'll take this one. Okay, so the first kind of bucket under sustain our efforts are financial actions. So our big action item here is to pay me, and hopefully potential staff too. Specifically like a bookkeeper, because there's lots of things I'm good at. Bookkeeping and accounting is not one of them, and we want to make sure we get that done accurately. We want to grow our merchandise sales. Bobby's working on that. We got some fun things coming out with sunglasses and gloves, potentially some hats, some water bottles. Keep your eyes out. There's some really fun things coming. We want to build a substantive donor community. Along with that, we want to secure grant funding. We need to do some initial board-based fundraising. If any of y'all have ever been on a nonprofit board, you know fundraising is a big part of that. And so we will be working with our board on that. We'll be doing a lot of work on financial planning, cash flow, payment processing, all those fun behind the scenes things that need to happen. And then finally, building some scalable fundraising operations. And we might have some news to talk about this later, but for now, we're going to keep it broad and non-specific. And then Kaylee, do you want to talk about organizational actions?
Yeah, happy to. So in addition to the financial stuff, we've got to, I said earlier, figure out kind of our internal organizational function. So as we grew, we also grew our numbers of different web-based apps that we were using to to the chagrin of everybody on the board. So working on consolidating all of our web apps, developing our Canva and branding templates, and again, just huge shout out to Bobby. This presentation is an example, but the Canva is full of just like amazing design work from him. Hiring consultants as appropriate. We've actually done this in the past to help us develop grant proposals, but continuing to do that as needed. And then lots of things that would probably bore folks to death, but like my favorite things like organizing shared calendars and trainings for board and executive directors and email templates. So lots of this behind the scenes stuff that keeps us running and makes sure that we are efficient and effective at the more fun parts of our programming and mission-based work.
And that is our strategic plan. So with that, we'll go ahead and open the floor to any questions. I'm going to stop sharing so we can just see everybody. But I hope that was a useful, fairly fast overview. You can see we've got lots of irons in the fire, lots of things that we're working on. But I'd open the floor to any questions if you guys want to raise your hands, and we can. Kaylee is an excellent facilitator, and we'll call on you.
Jenny from the hike.
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What an amazing presentation. I really enjoyed just listening, just of all the excitement and what's to come. You all have just been doing such an amazing job, and I've really enjoyed working with you all. I'm sorry if I missed it. As you can imagine, I've been a little distracted, but I was curious about if your gear tester database will continue. I know that is something that we've been able to tap into, which has been so amazing. So just curious about that.
Yeah, great question. So what Jenny's asking about is probably 3 or 4 years ago, we started an opt-in gear plus size gear tester database. And I have interest in continuing it, but I think we need to figure out some legal stuff, and then just making it a more sustainable database form, because right now it just lives in Excel. So happy to continue sharing that data with REI as it makes sense, but it's definitely lower on our priority list right now. Thanks, Jenny. And if folks didn't see, Jenny works with REI and has been absolutely essential in helping us get funding and doing all the opt-out side programming. So huge thanks to Jenny and the whole team at REI for their support of what we are doing. One of the coolest things actually about that partnership is we got funding before we were officially a 501c3 nonprofit, which was huge in letting us get off the ground and get things going, because it does take a lot to actually become a 501c3. So really appreciate that. So, yeah. Other questions?
Folks, feel free to use the chat. Oh, here we go. Beth has, so Beth says, you mentioned breaking out of the gravel niche. Could you expand on that a bit? Do you have specific events in mind?
Yeah, and so breaking out of the gravel niche, like All Bodies on Bikes was never supposed to be gravel specific. It just kind of happened that way because Kaylee and I both really enjoy gravel. And so it was kind of a natural thing, but we recognize that like road biking is a big thing, recreational biking, mountain biking, bike packing. And so as far as events, RAGBRAI is a big one we're thinking of. That's it's a ride across Iowa. Actually, I got to do it with Corey, who's on the call right now. We met last year on that, which was really fun. But that's a road ride. You know, I'm trying to think of some other ones. The AIDS Life Cycle is also a road ride. Bike MS is typically a road ride. I don't know if any of the other board members want to chime in with things that we are potentially thinking of. But
Yeah, we'll be at Five Boroughs, and I think for those that don't know, that's a bike ride around New York City, all 5 of the boroughs of the city. And that's a road ride that also draws a lot of people who aren't necessarily traditional cyclists or even much of cyclists outside of that one event. And that's something, that type of event is something that we're interested in growing our presence at, just to get our message out to folks who don't necessarily see themselves as a cyclist of, 364 days of the year and just have happened to find themselves at this silly Five Boroughs bike ride. So that's an example. And I see some,
and you
so I shouldn't sell my road bike. Definitely don't sell your road bike, Beth.
Yeah. And, you know, honestly, I think if you look at the weaknesses there, back on the SWOT analysis, we know that like we're enamored with gravel, but we want to make sure that the organization isn't pigeonholed into just being a gravel organization. Because I mean, honestly, most of our chapter rides are on bike paths. They're on pavement. So we don't want to get pigeonholed. So other questions?
I'll
When
throw
is
out
New York City ride? It is May. Well, actually, we have 2 New York City rides. So we are doing a meetup and social ride on May 4th, on Saturday, and then on Sunday, May 5th, is the 5 borough ride in New York City. And I'd encourage all of you to come out for it. It's 40 miles. I'm actually renting a bike for it because I didn't want to travel to New York City with a bicycle. So I might regret that choice. We'll find out because 40 miles is a long way.
Marley, I can bring you a bike if you want. And I want to throw out, if anybody doesn't have a question but has a comment or an idea of something that they didn't see presented tonight. I think Jenny's raised something that wasn't on there, and there's been some really good ideas for events in the chat. So happy to take suggestions from folks too.
Ooh, that's a good question. So Beth asked about the Steamboat Gravel program. Do we see it persisting? I don't know, to be honest. Programming like that, yes. Steamboat presents some really unique challenges. It's incredibly resource heavy. And so like, how do I want to say this? Everyone that we have brought to Steamboat has been absolutely incredible and has become a really big member of our community. Most of our board is folks who were on the Steamboat team at one point or another. However, there's a lot of other events that aren't 3 hours from the closest airport and don't have absurdly expensive housing. And you know, this is our 3rd year with Steamboat. We're in conversation with them to see if it makes sense to do it again, but we're also open to other events where it would make sense to take a gravel team too. Because Steamboat is magical, but there's other things that would be a better use of our resources, I think.
And I'll mention our board is actually, after this call, jumping on another call to start to strategize and think about what we want our presence to be at that gravel event, at similar gravel events in the next year. So we'll probably have an answer, a firm answer for you pretty soon.
Yeah. Kaylee, do you want to take on this next, the one from Kristen? Ways to
Yeah.
get more involved, be helpful towards the goals for folks not in a local chapter area?
I love it. So, I mean, if you're somebody who is interested in being one of those people who forms another chapter in the coming years, please let us know, because that's something that we're tracking and thinking about. And then also, if you're not somebody who is who lives close to, sorry, the chat got me distracted. If you're not someone who lives in the immediate city of a chapter, but you live somewhat close to one, I know that many of the chapter leaders are interested in helping do some type of regional planning. So maybe, you know, if you live in Michigan, but you don't live in Marquette, Michigan, you might reach out to Nikki, who's on our call, who's the chapter leader in Northern Michigan, to do some type of collaborative event. And I'm sure Nikki would be interested in doing that with somebody in Wisconsin, for instance. So there's lots of adjacent opportunities, but there's also tons of ways to get involved in our national programming. And so we're at all of those events that were listed, we have some type of presence. And if you're thinking about attending any of those events, we'd love to have your support, either helping at an event booth or helping lead a ride. And then the final thing is that if you're really interested in a higher level of commitment, we are slowly and kind of strategically growing our board, but we are open to adding a few new people to our board at this time. So lots of ways to get involved.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is if you have a specific skill set, you know, whether it's social media or graphic design. I feel bad. I'm always going to Bobby over and over and over again. Or, you know, newsletter writing or finance, or if you have a specific skill that would be useful, please reach out. I'm doing a lot of these things right now, and I'm not saying that like, woe is me, but I know that there's ways that it could be improved. If you saw our newsletter today, that's a great example. I mean, it gets the job done, but it's not exactly the most mind-blowing newsletter you've ever seen. So that's what I would say. Reach out to me, Marley at All Bodies on Bikes, or info at All Bodies on Bikes. We're also open to additional programming. We had some folks reach out and say, hey, can we do some Zwift rides? And so now we have a Monday night Zwift ride that's led by members of the community. And so if you have other ideas like that, we're definitely open to them, as long as we have the bandwidth to make it happen. So I would love to hit you up for grant writing. Yes. I think AC suggested this, a future ABOB bike event. Yes, 100% would love to make that happen. I think we could really blow some people's minds about what a truly inclusive bike event could look like. But that's on the future list for sure. So.
All right, any other questions? Let's see, would love to host national webinars about topics like weight, diet, and nutrition. Yeah. During COVID, Marley and I did lots of online programming, and then as things kind of returned to be in person, we fell off of that a bit. So it'd be wonderful, Noelle and others, as part of our community actions, to kind of continue to develop that online programming.
Yeah, definitely. And shout out to Noelle. They are one of our Denver chapter leaders, and they just celebrated their 1-year anniversary, chapter anniversary, and they did a really cool like bike seat. They called it Bits and Bobs. It was like a gender neutral, body neutral class all about finding the right bike seat for your anatomy, which is, I wish I could have attended that. Like, so cool. So track stuff. I mean, I have zero experience with that, but reach out if there's an opportunity for us to partner. We've got people all over the country. So, you know, oftentimes that communication comes through me, and then I route it to the appropriate chapter leader. So very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, things are still coming in though, so I'm kind of like,
Yeah.
Amazing, Kimberly. Yeah, if you would send us an email, maybe Marley, do you want to put your All Bodies email in the
Sure.
chat?
Yep, I can totally do that.
And for folks that are interested in getting involved that aren't already, please do reach out. And for those of you who are involved in one way with All Bodies on Bikes already, but saw something tonight that caught your eye that you'd want to jump in and get involved in, please do reach out as well.
Yeah. And I feel like I would be remiss as an executive director if I didn't say, please make a donation as well. If allbodiesonbikes.com, it should work. Please let me know if it doesn't. Internet is very hard sometimes, and sometimes I find out, 3 days later that, oh, the donation button has been broken. But we would sincerely love your donations. We just filed our 990, so that'll be available publicly soon, but happy to answer any questions about that as well. So, ooh, Beth, what other podcast will you be on? Oh, okay, the Morphology podcast. Awesome. Very, very cool. So that for those who don't know, Beth McBride was on our last year's Steamboat Gravel team, and she got last place at Mid-South, and Mid-South makes a big party of it. So she's been on a couple podcasts, which is super fun. Okay, we'll give it a couple more seconds, but really appreciate you all taking the time out of your evening for this. I hope it was useful. And one other hugely beneficial thing you all can do is tell your friends about All Bodies on Bikes. Share the social media stuff, and just help us spread the good word. We do have one thing that we haven't talked about much, but we do have a resources section on our website that has a lot of really good info on it. We are going to continue to build that out. But for right now, it is pretty useful talking about how to find a bike that fits you, clothing, things like that. So.
Yes, everybody is changing their name to AC to mess with us, and it really did get me. I was like, what's going on with my computer? So got me, got everybody.
Got me too. Well,
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining. We will send out the recording of this shortly, probably tomorrow, let's be honest, because the board is meeting after this. So if the board wants to switch over to the link that Kaylee sent over, we'll move over there. And thank you all
See
so
you
much
over
for
there.
attending.
Thank you all.